Alright guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm going to go over something very important for every type of player to know. And it's my top 15 in PvP. Now, if you already like the title of the video, like and subscribe. And let's get right into it. So, I'm going to start from first to last, because number one is undeniably Sentry. Sentry is the best in PvP right now. He's a top pick in Timeline Battle and Otherworld Battle. And he has a complete kit. He's got Super Guard Break on 4 of his skills. He's got Constant Heal. He's got Heal on his skills. He's got an Ignore iframe on his second skill with a very low cooldown of 4 seconds. And with it comes Penetration, Debuff Cleanse, and removing buffs from the target. He has almost full iframes on 4 of his skills. His fourth is a partial iframe. His first isn't, but he has almost a full iframe on 5 that's insta-cancelable with large area of effect. Full iframe on 3 and full iframe on 2. On top of that, he has debuff removal lead that applies to all allies. He has super guard break immunity unlisted just so long as it's under debuff removal. He has very high native HP, especially in Timeline Battle. I've seen them have HP of up to 500k natively, and it works its way up to 750k under statistics of your cards. His weaknesses are that he has debuff removal on his second skill, which could overwrite his lead. So his lead triggers for about 12 seconds, and it's reduced to about half of the time when you constantly are in use of this skill. You have to be aware of that, but he still has a very complete kit, and that's arguably his only weakness. He also has CTP versatility, but I'm going to go over his top 3 CTPs. The first CTP I'd recommend for him is Conquest, and it could be Mighty and it could be Brilliant. And you will get the best out of him with this CTP. It maximizes his heal, it gives him added super guard break immunity. Clash makes him extremely tanky defensively. Essentially will eventually kill you, since he doesn't need to fully rely on maximizing his damage. He can just debuff you and super guard break and lock you for a majority of the fight, and he can tank multiple skills under this CTP. The second best CTP is what I have on him now, which is Greed, and it could also be Mighty or Brilliant. The Ambush stat gives him extra defense in certain instances, and it maximizes his attack. So you'll see a lot of Greed sentries that have the ability to one-shot opponents. And Sentry is one of the few under a Greed CTP that can one-shot almost all opponents. His third best CTP is definitely, well, arguably Regen. And the reason why I say it's Regen is because it maximizes his HP, which is one of his best qualities. It has the ability to cancel a skill when Sentry is already able to cancel a skill. The difference is that Sentry can cancel your skill when he's attacking you, whereas with Regen, he can just cancel your skill while you're attacking him. So it gives him a real added benefit. He gets an added heal. So I would recommend this over Authority, because there are times when the steal effect doesn't come up when you want it to, and it doesn't maximize his HP. But Regen has to be Brilliant. It cannot be Mighty Regen. Mighty Regen's RNG is poor, and it's a third choice option if you do not have the other CTPs. Okay, moving on to number 2, we've got Silver Surfer. Now, Silver Surfer also has almost a complete kit, and he's extremely good on manual play. He also has a lot of HP. He has a counter that can ignore iframes. He has 100% penetration. He removes all debuffs. He has damage immunity under this, and he also has invincibility on his 4th skill. His 5th skill has a very wide area of effect, and it does very, very high damage. It's because the 5th accumulates based off damage, which is very good. On top of that, his 5 and 4 are insta-cancelable, which easily combines with the 3rd skill. A few of his skills carry regular guard break. His 3rd can carry super guard break if you trigger the counter. And his 4th carries a lot of debuffs. On top of that, he also has debuff removal lead to all allies and himself. He has a revive. And he has heal on his skills. He's got high decreased damage received, and he's the best reflector in PvP. His weakness is that he has no constant heal. Because he has no constant heal, he relies a little bit on a CTP of Conquest to get the best out of him. But just because a CTP of Conquest gets the best out of him, it doesn't mean that he isn't CTP versatile, because he's actually very CTP versatile. Now, the reason why I say Conquest is his best CTP is because it gives him another extra heal. It maximizes his defense. It gives him added super guard break immunity that he doesn't have. His skill cooldown is a bit high, so because of that, he needs to be able to tank skills properly. The second best CTP I would recommend is actually Refinement. Back when he first arrived with this new uniform, a lot of people were rocking with this CTP with a double support, Colossus and Agent Venom. And under debuff removal, he was pretty much unkillable until the Pierce nerf. Refinement completes his weakness, which is his inability to constantly heal, but it could leave him open to some regular guard break skills if Vitality, which does give super guard break immunity, doesn't activate. So you have to be aware of that. You also may want to maximize his damage because he does have one-shot efficiency. Not many people are going to do that. They would rather maximize his HP and his defense, because Silver Surfer doesn't rely on one-shots, kind of like Warlock. He relies more on his tankiness and his counter. Now, number 3 for his best CTP, I would say, is Authority. With Authority, he can benefit from the steal, but sometimes it won't trigger right away. However, it maximizes his damage and gives him invincibility, and giving him invincibility could add a little layer of super guard break immunity under debuff removal, as well as super guard break immunity potentially from the steal. And also keep in mind, all of these CTPs can be mighty or brilliant. All right, third on the list, we have Wolverine. Now, Wolverine is definitely top 3, and you can argue that he's even a little better than Silver Surfer in some cases. But The reason why I put him in this place is because his strengths are undeniable. His fifth skill is one of the best one-shots in the game. And despite maybe having the ability to counter it in the beginning when Wolverine's debuff removal from his teammate isn't triggered, it can't be ignored. It has penetration. It has ignores target's dodge rate. It has debuffs. And it lasts very, very long. On top of that, he has cancelable skills with his new uniform on his 3 and his 4. His 3 giving invincibility. His old uniform, this uniform, his 3 has invincibility and it's a full iframe, and his 4 is a full iframe, and his 2 is an iframe. So he has 4 iframes on this uniform that basically give him complete evasion. So he's very hard to hit with this uniform. This old uniform is arguably better than his new one, despite his new one maximizing his damage. Because on his new one, compared to his old one, his third and his fourth are almost insta-cancelable. So you could maximize his damage and then equip it under the fifth skill as well. On top of that, he has constant heal. And he has immortality. He will kill you. And he will survive, especially under debuff removal. His fifth also carries super guard break immunity under debuff removal. And he has super guard break on that skill as well. His weaknesses, however, is that despite his constant heal and a heal off a certain percentage, his HP and his decreased damage received of 25% is actually more on the lower side, so he's more susceptible to sometimes being one-shot. He also needs an ally with debuff removal lead in order to do high levels of PvP. Despite that, it doesn't stop him from being an easy third choice. Wolverine is also CTP versatile, as you can see with me. But let's talk about his best CTP, which is Greed. And I say Greed, and it could be Mighty or Brilliant. That's number 1. Number 2, it maximizes his damage. And you want to maximize his damage. The quicker that you can get a one-shot on Wolverine, the better. His old uniform desperately needs Greed in order to maximize his ability to one-shot, because his old uniform lacks damage compared to his new one. But for both uniforms, Greed is the best strictly for PvP. Ambush gives him extra defense as well, and it maximizes his damage and gives an extra layer of super guard break immunity. His second best CTP would be Conquest. Conquest maximizes his defense even further, adds an extra layer of super guard break immunity, but it doesn't really maximize his damage. So you want to be aware of that. I think that because of his low HP, he actually requires a Brilliant Conquest, not really a Mighty Conquest. Keep in mind also that Mighty Conquest and Mighty Greed also have Reflect Negation, which is very useful. But the reason why Wolverine doesn't work with Mighty Conquest and only Brilliant is because of his low HP. And I say Mighty Conquest works better on Sentry and Surfer because they have high HP. Now, his third best, it's definitely Authority. It works about as well as Conquest, and it's a CTP that's much easier to acquire. And it gives him invincibility, which adds an extra layer of defense, super guard break immunity. The steal under debuff removal makes him almost invincible. Under majority of skills, especially if the CTP is Brilliant. And it also increases his attack with accumulation. So in some cases, it could be even better than Conquest, but it also must be brilliant because you want to get the full benefit of the steel. Number 4 on this list, we've got Adam Warlock. And Adam Warlock's uniform is pretty old at this point, but his uniform is still meta and it's still kicking. And he has a lot of skills that are pretty exclusive to him, and I'll explain. His second skill is arguably his best skill, and it has a counter attack that is an ignore iframe even without the counter attack triggered. It removes active buffs and it gives incapacitation. It gives HP recovery and debuff cleanse, as well as extra stats and ignore targeting. He gets a third skill that's almost a full iframe that gives accumulation. On top of that, his second skill is insta-cancelable, so you can combine it with another skill quickly, and that skill will also be an ignore iframe as well. On top of that, his fourth skill gives invincibility. It's a very long skill with very long invincibility that also gives a damage proc as well. On top of that, he has a cancelable fit skill. You gotta wait about a second to actually activate it, but it is cancelable. And he actually doesn't need debuff removal lead because he has debuff removal on his second skill with a very low cooldown. On top of that, his fifth skill also gives barrier and increased stats. His second skill also has a very wide range, so you could use it from afar. He has constant heal on his artifact. He has a revive. He has a fair amount of decreased damage received. Now, his weaknesses, however, are that you need to maximize his damage to get the best out of him in most situations. And you could tell that he has low HP generally. So while he could be used in various circumstances with some different builds, you would want to put him with Colossus to get the full benefit of his capabilities. Also forgot to mention that he has additional pierce damage on his uniform passive as well as native guard break immunity, giving him CTP versatility. Now, let's talk about his best CTPs. I would still say that his best CTP is Conquest, because with a full build on cards and with Colossus, under debuff removal and a brilliant Conquest, the Conquest definitely has to be brilliant, he becomes almost unkillable. And his defense goes through the roof. He gets another heal. He gets super guard break immunity from wall. And he gets reflect negation. Reflect negation is one of his primary weaknesses. He can easily get reflected and die, especially when his attack is high and the wall effect isn't up. So he needs reflect negation desperately. Now, because he needs reflect negation, this is why I recommend number 2 of his best CTP, which is Greed. Now, Greed maximizes his damage, and the ambush effect gives a very solid layer of defense that's much needed, and especially when he's combined with Colossus. On top of getting super guard break immunity, maximizing his attack, getting a small heal, and reflect negation. Third best CTP is what I have on him now, which is Energy. It gives him extra pierce, maximizing his damage, and it gives him chain hit. He is generally proc friendly, and with the ignore dodge, it maximizes his one-shot efficiency. So number 5 on this list, we've got Thanos. Now, Thanos has some very great strengths and very great weaknesses. He does have the best defense in PvP with decreased damage received by 55%, which is very, very high. On top of that, his native HP matches that of Sentry, so he has very, very high HP. Now, he has a first skill that removes all buffs, ignores iframes, penetrates, and also removes all debuffs. So he has debuff cleanse on this skill, and the cooldown on this skill is very, very low. This skill also has the capabilities of one-shotting about as much as maybe Warlock, which isn't really enough on its own, but can be in certain situations. His 2 is a full iframe, and it's partially cancelable. His 3, his 4, and his 5 are all insta-cancelable, maximizing his damage greatly. On top of that, his 4 is a full iframe if you need to land on it. On top of that, he's got invincibility, and he has immunity to all debuffs during this skill. He ignores enemies' damage decrease during this skill, which makes it pretty efficient. And on top of that, this skill also does not get reflected. His other skills get reflected, but this skill, which is arguably his best one, does not get reflected very greatly. It also has a lot to do with HP. He gets HP on his first skill, and as a passive, he increases his damage to superheroes by a lot. It's some of the highest in the game. He has debuff removal to himself and all basic attacks to himself and to villains. And he has a lot of attack buffs that increase damage to targets with remove all debuffs effect. His heal is generally quite different from the rest. He gets heal from his first skill and when he gets hit, so it can be a little inconsistent. His weaknesses are pretty weak. He lacks any kind of revive. So this kind of makes him not CTP versatile at all. He's very specific with CTPs. On top of that, his first skill does overwrite his leadership, and it does it pretty quickly. So unlike Sentry, who could maybe have 6 seconds to 8 seconds of debuff removal until he overwrites it with 2, Thanos only maybe has like 4 to 5 seconds of debuff removal lead before he overwrites it. It's a big weakness, leaving him very, very open to debuffs. In particular, against Wolverine. Wolverine absolutely slices him up after he doesn't have debuff removal. His CTPs are very specific. His best is arguably Conquest, but it has to be Brilliant Conquest. And this gives him more efficiency because it gives him an extra layer of super guard break immunity, and it maximizes his HP as well, and it increases his defense, and it maximizes his defense pretty effectively, in addition to reflect negation. However, a very, very close second is Authority, and Authority can be mighty or brilliant because Thanos has 55% decreased damage received, so he will benefit from a low amount of steel and survive various one-shots under debuff removal. It maximizes his damage, it gives him extra invincibility, giving him another layer of super guard break immunity under debuff removal, and he gets accumulation. His third best choice is regen. And regen has to be brilliant. It has to be. And he also would need Colossus under that CTP. Like, he desperately needs Colossus under that CTP. Because while it cancels the opponent's skill, and it could do it frequently with a brilliant, it really does not maximize his defense in any way. Thanos needs extra layers of defense because of his weaknesses. And on top of that, he doesn't have anything like native guard break immunity. He has super armor, but super armor is a buff. It's not a permanent stat like guard break immunity. So he gets regular guard broken with refinement, not under vitality. So refinement I do not recommend, and I would recommend regen over it. Now here's where the list starts getting a little bit subjective or controversial, because it involves meta being used in a niche kind of way outside of timeline battle, because timeline battle is very exclusive to the best of the best usually. So number 6 is Madelyn Pryor. And the reason why, first off, she has immortality. Second, she's got very good decreased damage received, and she has native penetration. She also increases her pierce damage to make her pretty relevant, especially after the pierce nerf that occurred a few months ago. She has a counter on her second that helps her recover HP and gives damage immunity. She has accumulation on a cancelable third skill, insta-cancelable. Her fourth skill is a full iframe that also recovers HP and gives invincibility. And of course, invincibility combined with debuff removal gives super guard break immunity. On top of that, she has a debuff removal lead for herself and to all allies. And her fifth skill, which is also one of her best skills, gives extra attack, and it's also insta-cancelable. And it's also a full iframe. So you could land on it, or you could cancel it and land on your counter. She's very versatile in her manual play ability. Her weaknesses, despite having a good amount of HP, she has decent HP, and she has good decreased damage received as well by 40%. She is a blast, so that leaves her open to universals and speeds. And I would say in today's meta with Sentry and Surfer and Thanos with Brilliant Conquest, she now relies more on procs, especially since she's also debuffed in Otherworld Battle pretty frequently also. And you want to maximize her damage so she can officially one-shot. You can build her this way since she is tanky and has 2 heals on 2 of her skills with accumulation. Problem is she doesn't have constant heal. With that being said, her skills also could be canceled by running away as well. You could run away from her skills and she'll cancel all of them, leaving her very, very open. Just to add to a strength, she has resistances and she has low cooldown on her skills. Very low cooldown. Because she has low cooldown on her skills, she gets her tier 4 striker up extremely fast. I've seen her do it under 20 seconds. And then there's a glitch that's added onto that, but I'm not going to go over it. So the best CTP for her, I'll safely say it's Conquest. You know, it gives her another layer of super guard break immunity. It maximizes her defense. It gives her extra healing because she doesn't have constant heal. She basically becomes a real tank. She could tank multiple different skills with this CTP. In addition to reflect negation, and I'd recommend the CTP to be brilliant. Her second best choice would probably be greed. And the reason why is, like I mentioned before, she relies more on a proc to kill a lot of strong opponents. The ambush stat also gives her an extra layer of defense, and she gets regular guard break immunity, which she should get anyway, and she gets reflect negation as well from this. So maximizing her damage could prove very efficient even if she's debuffed in Otherworld battle. Shout out to Simak. A lot of the overlay clips I have of her are her killing meta with rage. So that's how it showcases that maximizing her damage is good. The third best choice is authority, because authority does not give reflect negation, but like greed, it could be mighty or brilliant, and authority could be mighty or brilliant because she has high decreased damage received, so she benefits from the steal, and she does get some extra attack from accumulation as well as invincibility. Now we are moving on to number 7 on this list, and it's somebody who kind of frustrates me. It's Deadpool. Deadpool is PvP oriented. However, he is quite limited in his abilities that the rest of the meta have. He can be used in various different ways, and here's why. He has this. It's a bug because it still says applies to self, removes all debuffs. And the cooldown for this is 25 seconds. So the debuff removal is 2 seconds less, but the cooldown is also 5 seconds longer than usual. So his debuff removal is not as good. And even though it says that it applies to self, it actually doesn't. It applies to all allies. Top of this applying to all allies, basic attacks and defenses. Because debuff removal applies to all allies, he becomes utility. He has utility in his kit. He could be centered in a team and lead a team without having to be meta. And I think that makes him meta regardless. He has some meta capabilities. He has a counter, and it has penetration, and it has damage immunity. But the problem is that it must be triggered. If his counter is not triggered, it's useless. So I would say that this skill, despite Deadpool working with it, because Deadpool has immortality on his artifact now that they fixed, it's an outdated mechanic. It's very outdated. It doesn't work efficiently, especially in timeline battle. It does not work efficiently. His third skill is cancelable, but its damage is off. While it's an insta-cancelable skill that gives invincibility and accumulation, the damage on this skill is very poor. His fourth skill is a great skill, but it requires a second and a half of delay. Sometimes this skill doesn't trigger properly. His fifth skill is insta-cancelable, and it does decent damage, and it increases his attack. Problem that Deadpool has is that while his skills give regular guard break, it does not give super guard break. So that is a very big weakness. Now, what's great about him is that he has constant heal. His heal is constant, and he has immortality. However, he gets interrupted quite a bit, and his only chances to get super guard break immunity are through immortality and debuff removal, or under CTPs or invincibility. He has a lot of weaknesses, but he does have utility. He can trigger his counter very quickly. It has low cooldown. He could trigger debuff removal on opponents. And because he has debuff removal, he doesn't have to kill meta to be meta. He could be a support and he could still kill meta in the same way. It's just you have to use him manually versus trying to play him on auto. Now, if you want to try to play him on auto, he's got to be tier 4. He has to be tier 4, and you either have to maximize his defense or his damage because his defense and his damage both lack. So his best CTP, I will just safely say it's Conquest, and Conquest has to be brilliant or else it's not going to work properly on him. He's not going to efficiently kill a lot of the meta. It's going to take him multiple rotations. He could be a fantastic tanker, but that doesn't mean he's going to efficiently kill meta. Now, he can efficiently kill meta, especially blasts like Warlock and Pryor, with a Greed. A Greed is his second best. It maximizes his damage and gives him extra defense. So he could definitely benefit from that, and it doesn't have to be so luxurious as a Conquest, which Conquest is much better on other tunes. All the other tunes above him, it's better than on him, for sure.
The Ignore, Dodge, and Reflect negation also helps.
His third best CTP, Energy.
Or Destruction.
Maybe to maximize his damage and make him a hybrid, because he's not CTP versatile at all. He doesn't have any CTP versatility. His decreased damage receive isn't the best. He's a speed. He doesn't really greatly benefit from authority. Doesn't maximize either defense or attack. Doesn't benefit from regen. Doesn't maximize his attack. He doesn't benefit from refinement. At least with energy, he gets Ignore, Dodge, and he's generally proc friendly, and under immortality he can do some very heavy damage under that proc, especially with added pierce.
With Destruction, you get a little less damage than energy, but a nice proc and guard break immunity, which helps.
Just so you're safe in PvE and PvP. Number 8 on this list, we have Jean Grey. Now, you could argue that she's a bit outdated in PvP, even though she is occasionally picked in Otherworld Battle, and she is a good leadership for AC because she has debuff removal lead that applies to all allies. She has insta-cancelable skills that could be easily combined. 5 and 4 are insta-cancelable. They carry significant stats such as invincibility and penetration. Jean Grey also has an Ignore iframe on her second skill, even though it's not an iframe in itself. So while she could do very good damage, she needs to land on this skill in order to get through a lot of current meta today. So that's arguably why she's outdated. However, she also carries stats such as guard break immunity native. This helps her become a little bit more CTP versatile than the crowd. She also has decreased additional pierce, and she has decreased damage received. So she's very tanky. On top of that, she also has a revive. She has a constant heal from her third skill. Her tier 4 striker is some of the best in the game as it carries Reflect. However, it takes a while to get that meter up for that tier 4 striker skill. So that would be the only downside. Now, since she's 8th in the meta, I'm very brief with my description. And her CTPs could vary, but not too much. She actually benefits really well from a CTP of Rage. I would put it as a first spot just to be safe, because unlike many other different characters with Rage, the Rage proc sometimes has difficulty actually proccing. But with Jean Grey, because she has so many hits on her skills, and her skills are insta-cancelable, she gets the enraged proc very quickly, and she gets the proc up at a very good time. So, and because she has native guard break immunity, and enraged gives super guard break immunity, she actually does quite well with this CTP. Now, the second best choice would be Greed, and I only say this because it benefits her attack greatly, gives her an extra heal, and it benefits her defense as well. And it also, with the CTP, it negates Reflect, which is one of her main weaknesses. Just one more added point. With the first choice CTP Rage, it could be Mighty or Brilliant.
But if you do pick Greed, it has to be Brilliant.
Third best would be Judgment. And the reason why I say this is because it operates very similarly to Rage, even though it does less damage. However, it could be used as a hybrid to be safe, and you can kill meta much more efficiently with this rather than something like Refinement, which, looking into further, I think Refinement CTP is a little bit outdated on her. On top of that, Judgment could be Mighty or Brilliant. Moving on to number 9 in this list, we have Spider-Man. Now, I know what you're thinking. Spider-Man is pretty outdated. He doesn't have a revive. But his damage is undeniable, and his evasion is some of the best in the game still. He has guaranteed dodge. He easily caps basic dodge. He has 4 iframes. His damage on 3, 4, and 5 are really good. He has very low cooldown on his 4th skill, which gives penetration, heal, removal of all debuffs, and accumulation. On top of that, it has the ability to remove the active buff from the target. So this skill is still insanely powerful. His 5th skill increases damage by 100%, and it gives invincibility. So he's actually evasive, and he's tanky. On top of that, he has invisibility, which makes his evasion greater. And then he recovers HP when he gets to a certain percentage of health. On top of that, he has increased damage to supervillains by a large amount, 60%. So Thanos, for example, a reason why Thanos is top 5 is because characters like Spider-Man are a massive counter to him. He one-shots with particular CTPs. He ignores enemies' damage decrease as well. So he's still a very viable option. He's a great starter for Otherworld Battle. And his best CTP is absolutely a CTP of Greed. With a CTP of Greed, it maximizes his damage, and it gives him extra defense, and it helps him negate Reflect, on top of giving guard break immunity, which he does need, and ignore dodge. Ignore dodge is also very important for him to have. With this CTP, I've seen him kill Refinement Carnage double support. With this CTP, he kills Sentry in the 2nd revive. He's really good still. He is underrated.
Greed can also be Mighty or Brilliant.
His 2nd best CTP is Conquest. I've seen a Spider-Man with a brilliant Conquest with Colossus, and he was insane. Very, very tanky. The problem is that it doesn't maximize his damage, but it maximizes his defense, especially under debuff removal. That's why I would recommend it as a second choice. The third best choice is actually Brilliant Regen. His ability to evade and Regeneration's ability of penetration to remove the skill or to cancel the skill is very good for Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's skills are very quick to pop off with his low cooldown. And he's also very, very
tanky with this
CTP with his heal and the extra shield. He won't benefit from CTPs like Refinement because of his lack of guard break immunity. But
Regen and Authority could be tied because Authority gives accumulation, invincibility, but doesn't maximize his damage. He will benefit from the guard break immunity and from the penetration stat, but his skills also do not get reflected. So he can definitely use this.
Number 10 on this list, we have the Ghost Rider. Now, Ghost Rider has a lot of PvP benefits despite his skills being geared more towards PvE. He lacks guard break immunity, making him not very CTP versatile. And I've seen too many times with defensive CTPs, it's actually not very good for him. It's best to maximize his damage. That's the best you're going to get when you rock him in PvP if you've got damage-related CTPs. His best skill is his fourth skill, which is an Ignore iframe. And it's not an iframe, but it still works completely when Ghost Rider activates his Immortality artifact. So when Ghost Rider is at 1% and you use this skill, you get the best benefit out of it. On top of that, he has an iframe on 5, which would actually be better off if you canceled it. It gives invincibility. And his third is also an iframe that could definitely be landed on. And it gives HP and damage immunity.
Plus his increased damage to villains.
This skill is partially cancelable as well. His second skill is also a partial iframe. And a lot of his skills also give super guard break immunity. Particularly 4 gives super guard break. He gets super guard break immunity from Immortality and debuff removal. But because he doesn't have debuff removal natively, he desperately needs a leadership to support him. Otherwise, he's extremely limited. This skill also increases basic damage by a 150%. It gives full penetration, and it could give incapacitation as well, which is a decent stat. And he can kill pretty much all of the meta with his skills combined. He actually is a top choice in Otherworld Battle as a starter, as he's able to kill many different toons right away, as he prioritizes his best skill first. Now, his best CTPs are any damage-related CTP. So his best CTP, I would actually say, to be safe, is Rage. With Rage, he can proc on it, and he can get the Enraged proc, maximizing his damage. He gets super guard break immunity from the Enraged proc as well, so that greatly benefits him. Second best CTP is Judgment. Again, Judgment maximizes his elemental damage. And while it doesn't give him super guard break immunity, it gives him more of a maneuverable ability to get the type amplification, since it's based off of movement and not based off of attacking. So Judgment can still be used in PvP effectively. His third best CTP is arguably Greed, because Greed maximizes his defense, but it doesn't maximize his attack as well as the other choices. But if you don't have the other two choices, you could probably pick this one, Greed, and as long as he's tier 4, you can get some benefit in some levels of PvP. But I would just not recommend building him defensively.
He also benefits from Greed's Reflect Negation. The good news is that all of these CTPs can be mighty or brilliant, and it won't make much difference.
And number 11 is definitely Doctor Doom. While Doctor Doom has some benefits in PvP, and he's actually built for PvP, supposedly, he actually has a lot of outdated mechanics that should have been fixed a month after his arrival, but unfortunately the devs decided to ignore the suggestions proposed by content creators. Now, his penetration is native and it could be applied to all of his skills, which is pretty good. His second skill is a counter that ignores iframes and isn't iframe when triggered. It removes all buffs for a second, which is not long enough, and actually has a chance to overwrite his lead, which is not particularly good. The damage immunity is okay, but it's not going to be that beneficial if you don't have guard break immunity, which he does not. So he's not CTP versatile either. His third skill gives accumulation, which is okay. His fourth skill gives invincibility, and it increases all attacks, which is okay. And his fifth skill recovers a big chunk of HP and increases some of his stats, and can give incapacitation. Now, he also has a revive, which is very beneficial, and he has a good leadership. However, his skills are not insta-cancelable. His 3, his 4, and his 5 all need a half a second to a second to activate, making him very, very slow. On top of that, if you don't have enough damage on him overall, his penetration has a chance not to work at all. So that's a downside of that. On top of that, he's quite weak. He doesn't have constant heal. Despite having a good amount of decreased damage received and up to 60% reflect negation, it doesn't help him enough. He has super guard break on 2, 3, and 5, but super guard break immunity is very common, so it has a chance not to work. On top of that, he overly relies on a triggered counter to get ignore iframe, and there's a lot of reasons why the counter can't trigger. It can't trigger if he's under invincibility and the opponent doesn't have penetration. It won't trigger. It won't trigger if he gets debuffed, which is more likely since he has a counter that overwrites his lead. And he also lacks any kind of maneuverability. He needs to be at a closer range in order to get all of his skills to go off. So he's actually very difficult to use. And I would recommend him, if you really want to use him, to only use him on manual. Or if you want to tier 4 him, to use him as a starter tanker in Otherworld battle. Because while he's not the best tune in terms of overall damage and ability to kill meta, he will always have a good amount of utility. The best CTP to put on him, I would say, is Authority. He desperately needs invincibility combined with some debuff removal to get super guard break immunity. He needs super guard break immunity from Steel. He needs Steel itself because he needs to be able to tank damage. And he needs as much damage as he can. You need to somehow maximize his damage to the best of your abilities. So Authority gives extra accumulation. Second best CTP, I'll safely say it's Conquest. He gets Reflect Negation, and he gets Super Guard Break immunity from the effect of Conquest. And he gets
a good amount of heal and defense as well,
especially combined with Colossus. His third best CTP, it varies. It's between Transcendence or Greed. So I would say it's a tie between the two. I would say Transcendence is a decent choice because it maximizes his energy attack and it gives him Ignore Dodge and Invincibility and Decrease Reflect. And the Penetration also has a chance to cancel the skill. So it gives him a lot of extra abilities that help him in his survival and maximize his damage. Greed, on the other hand, is not going to maximize his defense at all, but it will maximize his offense. So it would make it easier to kill the opponent with his combination of his skills. And of course, he benefits from the ambush, getting the reflect negation as well.
In order to get the best out of him, I would recommend at least the first two choices of CTPs to be brilliant.
Moving on to number 12 on this list, we have a bit of an outdated tune that's still viable, which is Carnage. Now, his CTP choices are now unorthodox, as I don't think he benefits too great in all PvP with a defensive CTP, but it's best, in my opinion, to utilize his damage as best as you can, because his fourth skill, which gives penetration, all attack, and damage immunity, has very, very high damage. And on top of that, combined with his third skill, gives it Ignore Iframe and gives him accumulation based off of damage. So the more damage he gets and does, the higher it will be. So this greatly is benefited despite this skill not being an iframe. However, his fourth skill is insta-cancelable, and his third skill only has about a second of delay before you can cancel it. So these two skills combined are very deadly. On top of that, this fourth skill carries super guard break as well, so it's very beneficial. His fifth skill is a little bit tricky to use, but it gives invincibility, and it actually has an iframe in the very beginning of the skill. So you could use it as a tactical maneuver to avoid certain skills, block certain skills, and follow up the damage. So he's a little bit tricky to use these days, and he's not often picked anymore. He has guard break immunity natively, so that's very good. And he also has
a chance to increase critical damage by 100% on crit attacks.
Because you see all of these attack-based stats, it makes sense to perfectly utilize his attack, especially since his artifact carries immortality. So his best CTP, I would argue is greed. It gets the best out of his attack and makes him pretty defensive.
It gives him ignore dodge, which is great. It gives him a little heal, reflect negation. And the CTP could be mighty. It doesn't have to be brilliant.
This CTP I would definitely recommend over the second choice, which used to be the first choice, which is
Refinement, which, keep in mind, it's still good, and it was originally meant for him because it carries lots of heal, and since Carnage has a lot of decreased damage received, he becomes a great tanker, but the damage with this is generally not very good. Keep in mind that while he does benefit from Vitality, Super Guard Break Immunity, and Ambush, he gets Super Guard Break Immunity through Immortality and debuff removal. I'd also recommend this CTP to be brilliant. However,
you could always go with this third choice, which is Energy. It maximizes his damage greatly as Carnage is proc friendly. It gives him ignore dodge and more critical damage and more chain hit damage.
the combination of ignore dodge, increased chain hit, and the pierce beatdown definitely maximizes Carnage's damage, even better than the first choice, but it does make him weaker defensively.
So number 13 on this list is actually a very unique and interesting choice. It's Invisible Woman. Invisible Woman's rework was very, very good. She has a lot of abilities that are very unique to her. And it's important that I discuss them because she has become a primary choice in Otherworld Battle because of her passive, which gives debuff removal to all allies. It's a uniform passive. It's very, very good. It makes her a utility character no matter what. But her skills are actually very, very powerful. And if you know how to use those skills, you can actually kill meta with very little because she's a debuff queen. Her third skill, if you are able to charm with the third skill before the opponent gets debuff removal, you could lock them in charm, preventing them from attacking and healing. This is extremely beneficial. On top of that, this skill is cancelable, insta-cancelable. On top of that, it gives accumulation when attacking, which is very beneficial. She has penetration on the fourth skill, granting all damage immunity and increases attack. I would rather land on it because it is an iframe, a full iframe. Her fifth skill gives invincibility, recovers HP, increases stats, and it's also insta-cancelable, maximizing her damage efficiency. She actually secretly gives a barrier of 1 to all allies, which actually can come in clutch. You can see it occasionally. And she gets invisibility very, very frequently. More frequently than Spider-Man. So, she also has decreased damage received. She has guaranteed dodge as well. Her awakened skill is a one-shot. It does very high damage. What is her best CTPs? Her best CTP, it's probably Greed. Maximizes her damage. Helps negate Reflect. Gives her extra defense and ignore dodge. And gives her extra heal. Giving her a damage boost is great. It allows her to kill the meta much faster. She gets super guard break immunity from it. So she greatly benefits. Second best CTP, Authority, she does benefit from invincibility and steal, and then she gets guard break immunity
and super guard break immunity.
She gets added accumulation, so it benefits her damage.
She greatly benefits from the steal effect, especially since she's constantly in invisibility, getting the steal meter up faster without taking too much hit damage.
Third best CTP is Conquest, because Conquest gives her a very good amount of defense. It gives her super guard break immunity, and it provides a little bit of HP,
Heal, reflect negation, and regular guard break immunity.
She definitely needs. And I would put it over Refinement, because Refinement lacks guard break immunity. Even though it doesn't lack super guard break immunity, it still lacks guard break immunity that she still would need in certain situations. And she definitely is versatile in her CTP choice. You could put her even as a support character, and she could still kill many of the meta with a support CTP. That's how good she actually can be. Number 14 on this list is Fear Itself Hulk. Now, I'm not going to be reviewing his newest uniform very thoroughly, because his newest uniform is actually more geared towards the other side of the game. This uniform does maybe slightly better against some sentries, does slightly better against Thanos, and maybe against Adam. But this uniform otherwise can be a liability unless you're maybe starting him in Otherworld battle. However, his old uniform is still pretty useful for PvP, and I'll explain why. He has an Ignore iframe skill that gives penetration and invincibility and increased damage. So this skill is still very viable for PvP. It can one-shot a few opponents. On top of that, he has a skill that can be insta-cancelled that gives him a 50% max HP increase, which is very useful. His second skill is a partial iframe that could be used in emergencies that remove all buffs. On top of that, his second skill and his fourth skill also give super guard break. On top of that, his fifth skill does a lot of residual damage over time, and he gets damage immunity. So he has a lot of beneficial PvP stats. He decreases basic damage by 35%, which is fair. He also has constant heal. On top of that, he gets an HP increase when he reaches a certain HP threshold. So his HP skyrockets, and his skills are primarily based on his HP. Physical damage 66 HP, 85% HP. So you want to increase his HP as much as you can. This uniform really helps him utilize that ability. He doesn't have debuff removal lead, which is an issue. So he does need debuff removal to succeed in decent levels of PvP. His first best CTP,
Mighty or Brilliant Conquest.
he maximizes his offense and his defense because he gains extra heal, he gets super guard break immunity, and he gets HP after a certain percentage. Maximizes his defense, especially when he's paired with Colossus. He gets reflect negation, which is one of his primary weaknesses. His second best CTP is what I'm rocking on him now, which is Authority. Could be Mighty. It doesn't have to be Brilliant. He benefits greatly from the steal under debuff removal. And on top of that, both CTPs give regular guard break immunity, which he definitely needs. On top of that, he gets additional accumulation, which helps maximize his damage. On top of getting super guard break immunity through steel and through invincibility and debuff removal. Third best choice is regen, but of course it has to be brilliant regen. So you get the penetration stat up almost all the time. And of course, Hulk is always going to benefit from increase of HP, and he's always going to benefit from heal. The other CTPs like Refinement, he cannot benefit from because Refinement doesn't carry guard break immunity. Okay, last but not least, we've got Quicksilver. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can a toon with no decreased damage received, no revive, low HP, and not much defense, and not much heal, how can he thrive in PvP? Well, it's because his one-shot ability is undeniable. And he's got multiple iframes on 2, partially, 4, and 5. 5 is insta-cancelable with accumulation of damage while attacking, which is very good. His fourth skill is an ignore iframe that gives heal, removes all debuffs, and increases stats. His third skill takes about a half of a second to cancel, but it has invincibility. And with invincibility combined with debuff removal, it gives a little layer of super guard break immunity. He has native penetration of 70%. His 4 and his 5 both carry super guard break. He has a lot of PvP abilities, but he's mostly played better on manual, or if you start him in Otherworld Battle. If you start him in Otherworld Battle, he prioritizes his best skills right away. On top of that, you want to capitalize as much as you can on his guaranteed dodge, which is the highest, I think, in the game or in PvP at 45%. He also has ignore targets dodge. And it can be combined with the statistics of his artifact, which is a 14% chance to dodge everything, or higher depending on how high your artifact is in terms of its stars. Now, he is a little tricky to use, and he's very squishy. He's not particularly defensive. Even when you use defensive CTPs, he's still not particularly defensive. But if you increase his attack as much as you can and you spike up his dodge, he dodges and he kills pretty efficiently. Now the question is, how do you build him? The 3 best CTPs I recommend. The first one is Greed. Greed maximizes his damage with ambush. It also gives him a little layer of defense and a small heal. And he also benefits from reflect negation from this CTP and the second choice. He's also very proc friendly. So with Greed, the proc activates at the very beginning before you even attack. So you may want to either switch him out later or use him in the beginning of the match, like I mentioned. Second best CTP, I would say, is Conquest. I've fought a brilliant Conquest Quicksilver with Colossus. He was very, very strong defensively, combined with the dodge, of course. However, because he's a speed, he could still get caught by certain combat meta. which is why I don't really recommend defensive CTPs as much as I do offensive CTPs. He can benefit from a Mighty Conquest or Mighty of the first choice. It doesn't have to be brilliant. And when other tunes are debuffed, he can dominate in Otherworld battle. Third best CTP, I would easily say it's what I have on him now, which is Energy. Beatdown gives him extra pierce. He gets chain hit damage. And like I said before, he's very proc friendly. So he can cancel multiple skills and one-shot the opponent. Especially from chain hit combined from energy and from his uniform passive. This was the top 15 in PvP. If you like what you saw and you lasted this long, I thank you. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. Don't be afraid to ask me any questions. And just an added saying, I will be reviewing X23. And if she is in this category, I will make a follow-up video on her review. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.